Hello everybody, welcome to our first webinar on 3GPP progress so far, industrial verticals and releases 16 and 17. I'm here this morning with my co-chair Maxime Flamand, who is CTO of the 5G Automotive Association. I'm just going to walk you quickly through the agenda today. You can get these slides online, so you can see a little bit about the background of the work that we're doing with a subset of 3GPP market representation partners, that is 5GIA, 5G, ACIA, Public Safety Europe, and the 5G Infrastructure Association, which is part of the 5G Public-Private Partnership in Europe. So this is what we're doing. You can find more details, as I said, in the agenda. So we're going to start with this quick introduction. So, and then I will pass the floor to Maxime, who will present our panelists this morning. So we will be starting with a couple of polls very quickly, and I will talk you through those in just a second. Then up on the floor next will be Georg Mayer, who is the TSG Chair for SA in 3GPP. He will give us a status and an outlook for May 2020. Then we will do a question and answer with Georg, and then we will pass on to Balazs Bertenyi, who is TSG Chair for RAN. He will be talking us through 5G radio standardization for verticals, and again we'll be moderating a panel Q&A with him afterwards. Then we will pass on to our industry vertical champions, so Antonio Arcidiacono, who is Chairman of 5G MAG, Director in Technology Innovation at the European Broadcasting Union. And then we'll also be listening to Bahr, who's from Siemens, and he is the working group chair of the 5G ACIA for user requirements. So over to, yes, and I'll just explain quickly about the questions and answers. You will see that you can post a question at any time that you like. Because we have different panelists, we would be grateful if you can indicate who the question is for. Okay, so that would be helpful. We'll be answering all the questions in the dedicated slots, but you can post anytime. Questions that we can't answer this morning because of time constraints, we will get back to you afterwards in a special report and make more details available online afterwards. All the presentations will be available, as will be the recording. And we'll also be, Maxime will be launching a series of polls, and he will be reading out the question for you, and you have a few seconds to answer, and then we'll share the results live online. So be ready to answer that. And afterwards, as I just mentioned, we will be doing a lot of coverage of all of the takeaways for the different stakeholders. We've got a great attendance this morning. We're really pleased that so many people not only from the telecommunications industry, from industry verticals, and from the research community as well. So welcome everybody on board, and I'll pass the floor to you, Maxime. And there you will see. Those are the people behind. Yeah, over to you. Thanks.
Welcome from my side. I'm very happy to co-host this webinar. And what we try to do also is to make it a little bit interactive, and so we launch a couple of polls right from the right from the beginning, but also in between the different presentations. And I see that we have about 170 participants, and so hopefully we get quite good statistics out of the polls. The first question is pretty easy. It's very simple. In which market is your company active or your research focused? So basically, we're trying to see whether the audience is focusing on specific markets or it is really a global audience. And I see that about 80%, half of the people have voted. So I give you a little bit more time. Little bit more, 64%. So I'll wait for 80% and hope it does not stagnate. Okay, so you should see the poll results. So we have about a good 55% having a global presence, and then otherwise 32% in Europe. some presence in India and Asia, and North America, obviously, as the time zone is not very favorable for them, only 2%. So great results. And then, so I'll stop sharing these results and then look also, I think we wanted to have another poll, didn't we? And that the second poll was related to your knowledge of 3GPP and whether you are member of 3GPP. So are you a member of 3GPP? Yes, no, but intended to join or interested to join, or not at all, and you're just not necessarily interested to join, but want to hear about what's happening, especially with relation to the verticals. Okay, I see that about 60% has voted. I'll wait 15 more seconds. I'll end the polling right now and share the results. And I see that 57% of you are 3GPP active members, and then 25% are there, but not members, but interested in joining. And then another 18% here wanting to know more, but not intended to join. So it's a good number. So 50, 60, 40. And so we know our audience for the next steps in the webinar. A little bit of background for the ones that are not 3GPP members. Georg Mayer is 3GPP TSG Chair for SA. He has a long-standing experience in 3GPP, and he will present the 3GPP SA status and outlook as of May 2020. We will also, after that, open for questions. And if anyone wants to post questions in the question and answer pane, don't hesitate. We from the side of Stephanie and myself, we will sort out the question, read the question eventually to Georg when the time comes.
So, hello, my name is Georg Mayer. Thanks for having me here, and I will give a short overview of the 3GPP status at the moment and a quick outlook where we are, especially in regards to verticals. So on slide number 2, you see the content of this presentation. I have a lot of slides. I will only go quickly through them and touch all the major issues. I thought it's good to provide you a bit more material on the slides that you maybe can use also later on. So let's start with an overview of 3GPP. My intention here is to give really only a rough introduction. I guess many of you are already familiar of what 3GPP is and how it works. So this is just sort of a recap of what we are and how we work. So slide number 4, please. 3GPP at a glance. So 3GPP is a global standards organization which provides the standards for mobile communication. We are around 700 companies now that are actively involved in the work. We develop our standards in releases, and they come out every 15 to 24 months, a new release. And above these releases, we have the mobility generations, which are roughly there every 10 years. So we started out with 3G, then 4G LTE, and now since a few years, we are working on 5G. We also cover standards for different mobile communication sectors. So we have voice over LTE, we have NB-IoT, and so on. We will see much more on this in the coming slides. On the left side, you see the structure of 3GPP. So we are practically having 3 TSG technical specification groups. I'm the chair of services and architecture group, so we call it just simply SA. All these TSGs, they are subdivided in working groups. These working groups are the place where the real technical work happens. And these working groups, they meet several times a year. So far around the world, nowadays, of course, in e-meetings. We are driven by contributions. That means you have to provide your input in a written manner. and we are consensus-based. That means practically nobody in the room should say no to your ideas before they can move forward. And that is sort of the guarantee that once something gets into our standards, it's really carried by the whole industry worldwide. So it's a real consensus. Next slide, number 5, shows how we develop our standards, at least in the SA and CT area. So we always start with the requirements that we call stage 1, and the groups where we put the requirements in is SA1. Then we have a stage 2 where we do security, architecture, and the architectural outline of the work that we call stage 2. It's done in several different groups, and then the protocols, they are done on stage 3 level, and they are mostly in the CT working groups. Next slide, want to talk about a bit the COVID-19 impact. So slide number 7. But what we have now since Q1, so since January, we have this year, we canceled all the 3GPP face-to-face meetings, including also the plenaries. Plenaries always take place on a quarterly basis. So the March plenary already was e-meeting. The meetings are now held as e-meetings, most of them using collaboration tools or GoToMeeting, so tools like this here as we do for having regular calls, but most of the traffic is on the exploder lists of the different working groups and is driven by email. We see at the moment that the Q3 will most likely not resume to normal, so we will go most likely for Q3 2020 also with e-meetings, and it's not clear now when we go back to normal. So we have a plan, obviously. We have planned meetings for for Q4 and beyond, but those might need to be cancelled as well. We have to see how the situation develops. It's important for us to guarantee the safety of our delegates and to make sure that when we do face-to-face meetings again, we have them in a clear and well-defined setting. So the output of these e-meetings is so far is obviously less than from the face-to-face meetings, but still what we saw in March is from the first quarter, from the first 3 months, the output is stable, and that is a very good sign. So we see the technical input that we get from the working groups up to the plenaries is in good shape, and people are really carrying on the consensus that they did in the working groups. So that's something that makes us hopeful, and also now already in the second quarter we see that the work in the e-meetings, in the different working groups gets more efficient. People have now experience, people know how to behave, there are more tools now, so it's a good sign. Our focus was and is the completion of release 16 and the release 17 and also release 18 work is slowly starting up now. Next slide is verticals in 3GPP. So slide number 9, this is just an overview because people always, one of the questions we always hear is like, well, isn't there an imbalance between the verticals and the operators and the vendors in 3GPP? Isn't the so-called telecommunication camp much bigger than the new camp of vertical industries? Well, in September 2019, we had sort of a survey in 3GPP SA, and those were the companies that indicated themselves as we see them here. So the top row are the verticals, those companies, they call themselves verticals. Second row is those companies that called themselves operators, and third row was vendors, be it mobile, chipset, network vendors, whatever. So actually what we see from the participation, at least company-wise, it's pretty balanced. We really see these 3 different regions in 3GPP. It doesn't mean that any of these 3 camps would speak with a consistent voice. That is not the idea to show here. It just shows what representation we have. On the next slide, number 10, I just want to hint that we started a number of new programs to better integrate new delegates and vertical industries. So we had newcomer introduction sessions since Q3 now. They were accepted by many delegates, so it's practically a session that we do before the meeting starts, where new delegates can come and where we give them background information. I dare to say this is a big success, and we intend to do them more in the upcoming face-to-face meetings, and we also plan webinar to give people who are joining now during this more complicated times an introduction. We established a mentoring process where new delegates can learn from each other and also from mentors. This got a bit stuck now with the COVID-19 situation, but we're also intending to drive this on. And then we have a number of new liaison persons now that go to the vertical industries bodies such as 5G ACAA, 5G AA, and so on. So people from 3GPP that also attend these bodies in order to have a stronger bond between 3GPP and the vertical bodies. We know there is more needed. There's quite a number of things still on the agenda, and I'm looking forward to pick all of those up one by one once we have a bit more stable situation. In general, it's always true, we need your input and cooperation. We will not be able to create the standards that serve your industry if you don't give us your input. And we need you in our room, and we need you to cooperate with us, and we're very willing to do the same. I jump over the next slide. I go to number 12 now, verticals and 5G, an overview. This is more now a technical perspective. So this is really like sort of a beginner's guide. Slide number 13 should just show we're practically building two skyscrapers with 5G. One is the smartphone evolution. That is the business as usual for 3GPP that we always do, giving more bandwidth, giving better functionality for the end user who has a device. But then completely new for us, we do this service enabling revolution, or however you want to call it. That is practically the integration of the verticals. They are not completely separated. What we create is a single network that will serve all, but the service enabling revolution is really the thing that is new to us in 3GPP, and also makes our work very interesting and also very challenging, and as said before, where we need your input. The next slide is number 14. It's about connecting the vertical industries. So these are diagrams I guess you have already seen. We have this triangle here that practically shows we have the enhanced mobile broadband, the massive machine type communications, and the URLCC. In order to serve the different industries. So what it shows here is practically we create a set of technologies that will be reusable by many different industries in order to run their services via the 5G network. We came quite far already with release 15 and 16. What we are now doing in release 17 and beyond is we really look at this triangle as something where the cornerstones are there, and where we now try to fill the area of the triangle, where we try to serve the different industries and new industries more and more, better and better, to give you an enhanced experience of what 5G can do for you. I will jump over a number of slides now and go straight to slide number 19. So I think this is, I changed it, so this is animated. Maybe you can go through it and just so that you see the whole slide. So we do our work in releases, as I said before. And where we are now, I said this also, is where we came from a lot of dreams, hopes, and visions in release 15 and 16, what 5G could be. But now 15 and 16 are practically finished, and we know now what 5G is. We have a very clear framework, and we have the technology in place. What we're now doing is not, we don't stop the work on 5G, we enhance it, we go on, we sort of bring the whole thing into the future. So we have experience from integration, we have requests for new enhancements, we have requests for new services. And these ideas we work in now in the upcoming releases, release 17, 18, 19, and so on, in order to provide industrial applications, service harmonization. So in the end, we have one single network, 5G mobile network, that will practically not only connect the smartphone users, but all the industries, and that is the goal. Next slide, number 20, shows as an example the mission critical standards evolution, how we did them. And here you see very clearly that if you're a vertical industry and you come to 3GPP, you need to be aware your work will not be done in one go. So the mission critical started out in release 13 with a single service, mission critical push to talk, that was still put on LTE, so 4G. And now over time, they saw the benefit of the 5G or of the 3GPP standards and brought more and more features to 3GPP, more and more requests. The framework gave them very good ground to grow on. And you see, this is a constant evolution process. So once you start in 3GPP, it's very predictable that you will stay for quite a while in 3GPP because you will have additional requirements. Your initial requirements most likely will only be fulfilled in a basic set in the first go, and so on. What you also see here is that the workload on 4G LTE is diminishing and the work on 5G is picking up more and more. On the next slide, number 21, you see the current release timelines and deadlines that we have. So for release 16, we shifted the stage 3 deadline now from March to June this year, 2020. The overall deadline for release 16 stayed the same. We did this in order to meet the IMT 2020 deadline. I think Balazs will talk more about that. Sorry. Why did we shift this deadline? Well, obviously because of the new situation due to the COVID-19 and due to the lower output that we saw over the first quarter. For release 17 now, we also shifted the deadline that we agreed in December. We shifted it then in March by 3 months. So now we are looking at a stage 2 completion by end of this year and a stage 3, that means protocol completion in September next year. If this is realistic, very much depends on how the e-meetings will go, how many e-meetings we will have, when we can resume normal procedures in 3GPP. So for release 17, we have a fixed timeline, and we will discuss it further if we can go with it. For release 18, the situation is a bit different. We didn't agree yet on a fixed deadlines and timeline, and we will see in the future how this works out. Nevertheless, on slide number 22, one of the key messages I want to give, because in these conferences, when delegates from vertical industries are present, one of the views is that if a new idea is there, it could be brought into the current release. The current release is mainly release 17. But release 17 is closed. We have a very clear scope. We know the content exactly. We had long discussions on it. So your goal shouldn't be to bring new requirements to release 17. If you have new ideas, if you have new requirements, new services that you want 3GPP to standardize, then please, you have to go to SA1 and bring them to release 18. So slide number 24 then is about release 16. I don't want to say too much about it. I already said we shifted it by 3 months and we will complete it by June/July. And it will be challenging still, but we don't foresee any major obstacles in that. Slide 26 then is an overview of release 17, 26. So the requirements work has finished, and on the stage 2 level, which is practically the first good technical look that we take at a release, we did the prioritization and timeline. This was done between SA and RAN, so we are coordinated on that. So we make sure that the The content is the same. And as I said, we shifted by 3 months. But one of the most important thing I want to say here again is the content of release 17 is fixed now, and we don't intend to open that package again. So there will be not a possibility to bring new items into release 17. On slide 27, we see a bit of what's going on in release 17. So we have a number of enhancements where we do network slicing, edge computing, network automation, and so on. So we do the normal enhancements for our basic network in order to make sure that mobility works better and better in the upcoming years. Then we also have enhancements for verticals that we already serving, or for vertical services that we already serving. For example, Internet of Things, location services, drones, or the mission critical services, which we now put onto 5G. So there, I put them as enhancements. Those are practically services that we know already, where we have a good view about them, how they should work, and where we progress them into the future. But then we also have a huge set of new features, and I just want to say the proximity services, for example, this is device-to-device communication, or also often called side link, at least in the RAN area, is for direct communication between devices. It's for car-to-car, ship-to-ship, container-to-container, and so on. So it's not limited to a single industry. It's a toolbox that gives you a lot of means for different industries. The same is true for multicast broadcast services, which we will have over 5G. And then a very big enabler, at least from my perspective, is the satellite integration. I guess also Balazs will have more on that, but practically, if we will have satellite coverage, native 5G coverage all over the world, that will obviously boost the availability of our services tremendously. The next slides, you can just jump over them. They are there for you to look at later. They practically show what state we are currently in 3GPP in the different working groups. And then on slide 35, it's on 3GPP release 18. And there you see this is just starting. So there practically everything is open. If you have, as I said, if you have new ideas, if you have new requirements, new services, please come to SA1, please talk with the people there, please get familiar with the procedures there, and bring us your ideas. Slide 37 then is my last slide, the summaries and next step. So again, we only conduct currently e-meeting. The output of them is stable, that is good. The output of them is not as much as we had in the face-to-face meetings, but we're working on improving there. Release 16 is on track, everything is going fine there. And release 17, we have a clear view on the content. The verticals are very well represented there, so we have a good balance between the different features, at least I dare to say that. That's obviously my personal view. And the work is starting now on the technical level in release 17. For some groups, it already started, for example, for SA6. New ideas, please bring them to release 18. The key steps that verticals need to do, and this is why I'm so happy to have workshops like these, is you need to coordinate, obviously, within your industry, but also across your industries. There are many synergies that we see now, as I said, for example, before the ProSy or side link, the device-to-device communication. That's a technology that will show synergies between the different vertical industries, and it's important that you are in good communication amongst each other in order to know what you expect and what you prioritize. You need to provide the necessary resources to the 3GPP standards process. That's always a challenge, and I know it's not easy. Once you're out of the requirements phase, once your requirements have been approved by SA1, your work goes to many different areas and working groups in 3GPP. You need to be present to follow the work and to steer it in your direction. And then the new improvements, some of them I showed before, we need to go further with them. In general, I want to say, let's work together. We're always looking for your input, but we also have to count on your patience and on your understanding that many things for us are still new, although we have now good experience with vertical industries. But when you're a newcomer to 3GPP, take some time, take some patience. Please talk with us, drop me an email, drop one of the chairs an email at any time, and we are glad to support you and bring your work further. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.
That was super, very clear. I think Maxime has a couple of questions for you, and I can also add some of my own from the Q&A panel that have come in. So
yeah.
Over to you, Maxime. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie. There was quite a lot of questions posted, and the first one is a general one, and yes, we will post the slides online at one point. So I will let Stephanie to do that from the practical point of view. An important question here, and that's also very close to the 5GA heart, is we sometimes see requirements sent by verticals and probably well adopted in the standards, but later not deployed and implemented in the market. So can you comment on what goes wrong along the line, and is there issues right from the beginning, or what are the symptoms and what are the possible ways to heal that?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, it's a very good question. It's a question that is not really related to the standards process, because we don't control what goes into the market or what operator provides or a vendor provides in their products. But in general, I think there are several things that you need to think about. First of all, an operator who wants to deploy a new feature usually needs a partner to test it with. So if you're a vertical industry and you are interested in getting a new service launched that we standardized, please talk to some of the operators, either in the standards room or most likely on a more management level, and say, we would like this to be deployed. And please have a cooperation with us if they're interested, if they see a business case. Another issue that we see is that for some of the industries, they have a much more long-term view. If I take, for example, the railways, they don't look at the standard of a given release as something that needs to be immediately deployed and then their trains will gradually work with more and more functionality. They usually look at a new generation of trains, which then implements a huge set of new features at once. And that makes it even more complicated for operators to evaluate when their business case is really to happen. So there is still, I guess, in the whole ecosystem, when it comes to the products, to the rollout, there's a large need, or there's a huge need that people talk with each other, companies talk with each other, work out common business plans and strategies when and what to deploy. 5G provides an enormous set of functionality, and not everything can be deployed at once. So you need to be also there a bit patient and aware that you have to talk with the people you want to count on.
Great, thank you. So 3GPP is not the answer to everything. It sets up the standard, and then but it's up to the members to eventually pick it up and then bring it to the market. And I have another question, and that's more in the work plan that you have presented. Is there any plans to start the work on an NR MMTC technology for release 18? Now, tell me more about it, because NR MMTC.
I think that's more a question for Balazs, but
right.
My understanding is that is on the way, but maybe it's better to ask that to Balazs, because it's definitely a radio question.
Okay, I have well, there is another radio question, but I will take it later. Is there any work planned on release 17 to reduce latency and guarantee service continuity during inter-PLMN or inter-operator handovers? So the classic question of reducing handover time or service continuity. Tell me.
Well, we definitely have service continuity issues and service continuity work item in our scope or on our list. If for that specific case we have something in now, I don't want to say yes or no, but I think it's something that that can be easily raised during the discussions. I have to apologize there. I was not in. It's a very specific case if you talk about handovers between operators. But in general, if you look about the issue of latency, that's definitely there, and that is always an issue. This is one of the enhancements that I said that we continuously have. So service continuity, slicing, and so on. These are the issues that we always bring on in every release.
Thank you, Georg. Last question. There seem to be enhancements for LTM that was missing in the release 17 scope. Can you clarify? So enhancements for LTM.
Yes. So that is, I guess, also more a radio question, but from my perspective, this is ongoing. So we will not stop working on LTE. And if we enhance it, is always a question that needs obviously approval and consensus. But in general, we go on with also making sure that the older generation can follow up and provide good services. So there's always enhancements of older generations also in our scope.
Okay. In the meanwhile, among the attendees, I got the confirmation that they are in the RAN release 17 enhancements. So
yeah,
thanks a lot. And so thanks, Georg. It was great to have you. Now we will go to our next speaker, Balazs Bertenyi. He is a 3GPP TSG Chair for RAN. But before that, we will launch our next poll. So to make sure you get a little interlude. I'm launching a poll, and the question is, which are the verticals that are the most likely to accelerate 5G investment? And you can choose your top two. So there is multiple choice. You could cheat, even choose 3 or 4, I guess, but I think we are preferring you to choose the 2 top ones. And there are quite a lot of different ones. I don't know if we were exhaustive in the list. Automotive, energy and utilities, farming, health, manufacturing, multimedia, transport, which is a little bit different than the automotive, obviously, and fixed wireless access, consumer access, and other like banking, food, mining. And I see that 41% have voted, so I'm hoping that more will vote so that we get a good stats. We are, by the way, 210 attendees just for the count, and so 125 have voted. I'm going to cut here, so for the sake of time, and the polls, and then share the results. And automotive still seems to be part of the vertical that is the one that is accelerating most of the investment, but manufacturer is very close. Georg or Balazs, do you want to comment on that? I guess you see the results.
Yeah, I can try to comment on this. Yes. This is Balazs speaking. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me. I mean, I was also voting. I voted for manufacturing. I think these 2 areas are clearly the one where there is the most amount of work and in 3GPP and standards. There seems to be the most amount of general technology understanding of how 5G can actually enter these domains in terms of functionality, in terms of other processes. So I'm not surprised that these two came out on top. Perhaps transport, I would have expected also to come a little higher. We have active work on railroads, for example, or railways, for example. But maybe because of the nature of that business, that it's more in the public sector rather than the private sector, that also has an impact.
Great, thank you, Balazs. And that's a great transition for your presentation on the status in the RAN, and I'll let you speak from now. Thanks.
So this is Balazs Bertenyi, chairman of 3GPP RAN, and I'm going to speak to you about how 5G radio standards in particular are catered towards verticals, looking at two of our most recent releases, 16 and 17. So yes, so starting with where the world is today. So one thing has become very clear for us, at least in working in this industry, that the global pandemic that all of us are now going through one way or another, that the role of cellular networks has actually become greater than ever. So while of course many businesses are struggling, and there are going to be impacts also to the cellular business, in particular from business customers, not so much on the consumer end, it is very, very imminent that the cellular and in general the mobile networks are as critical as many of the other critical infrastructures, from water to electricity and so on. So this, I think, gives yet another boost to further developing standards in the arena of cellular networks. And 3GPP is still growing strong. So Georg already alluded to some of the practical impacts of the current global crisis around the pandemic. Our face-to-face meetings have been converted to virtual meetings, etc. But I think what we clearly are observing is that the commitment of companies that do contribute and innovate is as strong as ever. So the momentum behind bringing new innovation and further development of 5G technologies through standardization is as strong as ever. So going to some of the Release 16 and Release 17 timeline aspects. So Georg already presented the overall timeline, and I'm going to give you a RAN-specific addition and amendment to that, just to give you an idea of where the process is and what sort of milestones we still have ahead of us. So the green part towards the upper end of the picture depicts Release 16, and as you can see, we are very much in the latter phases of that release, trying to complete all the different functionalities and features. So we have the stage 3 freeze as well as the ASN1 code freeze scheduled for June. So all the groups are very busy trying to achieve that timeline. The radio performance completion, normally the defining of the performance, the radio performance metrics, comes 6 months after the core completion, so that's still scheduled for the end of this year. Now, in terms of Release 17, we have gone back and looked at the schedule, and as Georg explained, we decided to shift it by 3 months simply because the Release 16 completion, because of all these e-meetings, have gone a little slower than what we would have really liked. So we had to shift the Release 17 timelines by 3 months. So what you see here with these different deadlines, in particular the ASN1 freeze for Release 17, which is now at December 2021, they have all been shifted by 3 months. And this also has a knock-on effect eventually on Release 18. Normally what we do on the radio side is when we complete the physical layer work for a particular release. So if I look at Release 17, the physical layer completion for Release 17 for RAN 1 is scheduled for June 2021. And that's the point in time where we define the package for the next release, and that's Release 18. So those things go sort of hand in hand. So if we move the Release 17 RAN 1 freeze, then the Release 18 package approval moves with it. And this is important to note, especially for the verticals looking at Release 18 and bringing in new proposals and functionalities for Release 18 to monitor these deadlines going forward. So I've also written down the key points for you picking up these slides after the presentation, but I've pretty much explained these now verbally. So moving on to the content, both for release 16 and release 17, and I'm going to put quite much emphasis on the vertical related content here. But essentially, if I look at the overall landscape on the radio side, I tried to put together one slide that shows the main pieces of functionalities and all the new things that are coming in terms of expansion of 5G. Now, before going into details on this, what is apparent is a large part of the work we do in 3GPP is directly catering to verticals. Now, if I want to put a percentage number on that, I would say that at least 50% of the work we do in 3GPP now in release 16 and eventually in release 17 is really targeting verticals. Now, having said that, many of the functionalities we do are common. So one of the, I think there was a question in the a Q&A about why are some of the features that are standardized are not successful in the marketplace for verticals. And one of the reasons for that, in our experience, is that we have done solutions, or we have standardized solutions that are too specific, too niche for a particular vertical. So simply the economies of scale and the justification for manufacturing elements for a smaller specific vertical market was just not viable. So that's at least one of the learnings we have from the LTE era, where we already started to address some of the verticals, but did so mostly in a dedicated and specialized manner. That is really not the way to go. We really need generic solutions. We need generic solutions that are equally applicable to a wide range of verticals. And with that, we can actually have at least the common hardware on the chipset side. Of course, there are going to be differences on the software level in the applications, but it's very important to get as much commonality as possible on the hardware level and on the chipset side. So this is sort of a shift in the mindset from 4G to 5G, especially on the radio side. And this thinking is very much there in all the design work we do for all these different pieces of functionalities. So what you actually see is a work program that has a multitude of enablers. It's essentially a toolbox. So you wouldn't actually find a specific feature for one specific vertical. What we are really looking into is defining functionalities that can be used by a multitude of verticals. And we actually provide a toolbox, and then specific verticals can cherry pick from those different functionalities and put together their version or their flavor of 5G from those standardized and common set of functionalities. So with all this preface, let me just go through the main things we do in 3GPP for verticals. And actually this slide includes all the generic mobile broadband functionalities as well. So if I start from the upper left-hand corner, a big chunk of work we do, and going back to Georg skyscrapers, and that's the left-hand side skyscraper in his depiction, is the smartphone and the enhanced mobile broadband business. We still have many different pieces of functionalities to make the network and also the devices work better, more efficiently for mobile broadband, in particular mobility, coverage, uplink performance. So we continue to work on MIMO, for example. That's still a big part of what we do on the radio side. We specifically work on coverage enhancements. We specifically work on dynamic spectrum sharing. So really pieces of functionalities that are critical to make mobile broadband even more efficient and viable. Then going to some of the functionalities that are more catered towards verticals. Multicast is clearly one area where we exactly try to do what I just described, which is having a common solution, a lightweight solution for this, as opposed to having a complex dedicated solution. So if we go back to MBMS in the LTE era, one of the reasons it never actually took flight in the commercial marketplace is that it was very specialized solution already starting at the physical layer. So simply the MBMS marketplace and market opportunity, the size of it did not really justify having a specialized scale or specialized set of products for that purpose, where already from the physical layer, so from the hardware onwards, there were considerable differences from plain vanilla LTE. Now, from that learning, what we try to do now with 5G is a much lighter weight multicast solution. So, for example, the public safety community, where multicast is of paramount importance, are going to be able to use much of the a common chipset, and all the multicast elements and some of the additions we do are only coming in on the higher layers. And Georg also mentioned satellite, and indeed satellite has become a big part of our work program from release 17 onwards, and we're going to address both NR, so both plain mobile broadband access as well as NB-IoT access over satellite. Now, these two things have a slightly different standing. So for NB-IoT, we will only start a study work first, and then for normal NR, we would already start with normative work. But essentially, 3GPP will eventually develop standardized solutions for both of these elements, not necessarily in 17, maybe the NB-IoT work will only be done in 18, but it's clearly on the roadmap already. The next one, going still on the left side, industrial IoT and manufacturing. So just with the poll we had, manufacturing came out as one of the top two elements, and I'm not at all surprised about that. Both in the sort of cellular telecom sector as well as the manufacturing sector, this is clearly an opportunity, and also for operators. So there are essentially two ways to use 5G in the manufacturing arena. You either do your own private network. If you're big enough, if you're a BMW, for example, or a Mercedes, you can think about doing your own private network. But if for smaller manufacturing plants, you can, for example, make use of commercial operators and just basically use one of their slices that are catered for you, and use slicing and operator deployed commercial networks for your manufacturing plant. And I will later on allude to what exact functions are catered for industrial IoT and manufacturing. And then the second topmost in that poll that Maxime just had was automotive. So side-link, which is the direct link, direct device-to-device link, as well as the traditional device to network link. We are continuing work on enhancing these elements, and again, I will have a separate slide on this. But basically, if you look at our work program, it very nicely mirrors those priorities that came out in that poll, in that these two elements are are an integral part of the 3GPP work program with considerable efforts and resources allocated. Then if I go to the right side of this slide, unlicensed spectrum across all the different use cases is also coming already with release 16. We might need to look into some specific enhancements still in 17, but those are probably going to be part of some specific features rather than having a follow-up function or follow-up work dedicated for unlicensed. But the point is that we are going to have unlicensed operation support in 5G already in release 16, and that includes standalone operation. So yet again, if a factory wants to use 5G and wants to use unlicensed spectrum in a standalone manner, the bits and pieces and the tools will be there in standards to do that. Then we're going to look into how to support a new sort of intermediate class of devices. We have the working name NR Lite for this. I don't know if that name will eventually survive, maybe not. But essentially, this work addresses a class of devices that is an emerging class, and it's basically looking at wearables, industrial sensors, and other enhanced massive IoT type of devices. Now, there was a question whether we address enhanced or whether we address massive MTC with NR. And right now in release 17, we don't have a dedicated work for that. We believe that what we have in LTE is still very much the solution that we see the marketplace is adopting for massive MTC. But at some point, we will likely start to work on massive MTC with NR radio. Whether that's going to be release 18 or not, that remains to be seen. There are so many things now that shape the way the industry is heading, both in terms of technology and financially and otherwise. It's difficult to say whether that's going to happen in release 18 already, but at some point it will. Positioning is also a key element for verticals, especially indoor positioning for some of the factory use cases. Same with extended reality, even though most of these XR cases are thought to be driven by commercial needs. There are clearly needs in the factory whereby you could have these extended reality applications for maintenance, for example, and other factory floor activities very much in use. And last but not least, as you know, 5G is being deployed all across the different regions, all across the globe. It's now 50 plus networks where 5G is already deployed or deployment is imminent. So any kind of learning we can get from those deployments, any kind of adjustments we might need to do to some of the functionalities from those learnings, we are very motivated to make those happen. So we will see what the feedback is from the marketplace, and if we need to do adjustments to the functionalities and standards, we will do so. So this is essentially an overall picture, and I'll go into detail on some of these. Maybe I will skip the EMBB because that's not so much the relevance for this audience, but just to give you the idea that EMBB is still very much the foundation of what we do, and there are several different pieces of functionalities that we address to make EMBB function better and more efficiently. But let me go to the next, which we already talked about through manufacturing and industrial IoT. And in this slide, I essentially try to compile the different tools, the different enablers that we work on in standards specifically for industrial IoT. So starting with the upper right-hand corner, the enabling private 5G networks, and this is not only, of course, a radio functionality, but very much a core functionality. So this is a functionality that spans across the entire network. Now, specifically for radio, there are a few bits and pieces that would need to be or that have been added to enable such private networks. But this is more a core network functionality, but it also gives you an idea that we don't look at this in isolation, but we look at the entire system and try to make sure that the system does have all the necessary support from radio to the core to the device, that such private 5G networks are technologically viable and possible. Now, spectrum is always an interesting question, and here we have all the different top-level possibilities, from using licensed spectrum through, for example, slicing. You can have shared spectrum, and you can also use unlicensed spectrum. So all the different spectrum scenarios and spectrum usages are made possible. URLLC was, of course, already mentioned as a key enabler. So the basics of URLLC were already there with release 15, and we're expanding on that in 16 and 17, especially on the reliability front. Enhanced reliability is critical in many of the factory use cases. And then, of course, the low latency and also the time-sensitive networking, the next element, is critical for real-time control that is used in many different applications on the factory floor. And last but not least, positioning, again, especially indoor positioning on the factory floor is critical for industrial IoT. Then moving on, I wanted to allude a little bit to these what NR Lite is and how NR Lite actually fits into this landscape of devices and corresponding use cases. So what this slide shows is this new class of devices is somehow in the middle between sort of top-end 5G IoT and has mobile broadband and URLLC. So specifically, these NR Lite class of devices would be these wearables, would be these smart grid use cases, high-end logistic trackers, healthcare monitoring, for example. I think this is one area that has a significant opportunity now to boost forward. Now with the current situation, we'll see how that business and technology develops, and also industrial cameras. So hopefully this slide gives you a good idea of how and where this new class of devices and the eventual work we plan to do for this in release 17 fits in with all the rest. Okay, and moving on to positioning, and I also have a detailed slide on this specific aspect. So again, what I try to depict here is what we already did in release 16 and what that gives you, which is the accuracy requirement of 3 meters indoor and 10 meters outdoors about 80% of the time. So that's the performance metric. And there you can see the specific technology solutions with RTT, AOA, AOD, and TDOA. And then we are expanding on that in release 17, basically bringing the accuracy down. We call it centimeter level accuracy, which is a nice term, but it doesn't mean you're actually gonna go down all the way to 1 centimeter. It's more about 30 to 50 centimeters that we're really targeting, and we're also targeting to bring this information available with a lower latency and also in the higher capacity cases where you need to scale this to even millions of simultaneous devices. And last but not least, I think this is important to spend a little bit of time on. This is the other case that came out on top in the poll, which is the automotive use case. So with CV2X and LTE having been done already, and there are many trials and activities already being done with LTE. We are also expanding on that, and we're gonna have a support for V2X also in 5G NR. So this is basically to enhance the CV2X performance we already have with LTE, and also expand to more use cases, for example, pedestrians, bicyclists, scooters. And for that, what we actually need is a very efficient power usage of this technology, because those people on bicycles and scooters, they're going to have a handheld device. So as opposed to, if you have the device in the car, then the power saving is not that important. But if you do have a handheld device for those pedestrians and bicyclists, we need to make sure that these technologies are as power efficient as possible, so they don't drain your smartphone batteries. I think we're pretty much running out of time, so I don't want to take more of the time. Maybe we can take some of the questions and make this a little bit more interactive, Maxime, if we could look at the questions.
Great, thank you very much, Balazs. I know that also Stephanie has a couple of questions, but there are a few ones that came up on the question and answer panel, and I'll take the first one that I that already came at the previous presentation. So, and it's related to the Wi-Fi 6 band, and 3GPP activities and cooperation or discussions with the IEEE on license bands for 5G operations on these bands? Tell us more.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. So when 3GPP started to venture into the unlicensed space already with LTE, that was the point in time where the cooperation with IEEE was already started. Of course, the coexistence of those two technologies in the unlicensed space was already very important at that point in time. Now we actually have an ongoing cooperation and discussion with IEEE on coexistence. We had a workshop, I think it was about 12 months ago, maybe a little more, specifically for coexistence of 5G NR and Wi-Fi 6. So I guess what I can say on that is that the cooperation between IEEE and 3GPP is very much ongoing, and of course coexistence is important. The different regulations in the different regions will have to be adhered to, and we're very much aware of the needs on that front, and we're working on those matters.
Great, thank you, Balazs. There was another question related to the drone segment and the vertical, if we can call it a vertical. How is it being covered in 3GPP?
So we had work done already in LTE for drones, in particular some of the drone specific information like height and so on. So there was some very basic functionality standardized normatively. We actually had a quite overarching study activity trying to identify what are the needs for changing or enhancing the basic protocols and physical layer functionalities, but we actually found that there is actually very little that needs to be done. And I think that was very good news for whoever is thinking about using cellular technologies for drones. Now, we haven't yet done any overarching study like that for 5G, but the between the lines expectation is that the findings could actually be very similar. So 5G as such is already very workable for drones. Now, some of the minor enhancements we did for LTE, we can very easily retrofit those for NR. I think that will come, if not in release 17, then in release 18. But in general, my message is that the cellular technologies, both LTE and 5G, are almost as such perfectly capable to for drone usage as well.
Great, thank you, Balazs. I have a few other questions, but before that, I want to check with Stephanie if she had something that. Yep. Stephanie?
No, I was going to ask a question about the common requirements, Balazs, because you mentioned the importance of having economies of scale, and if you could just briefly touch upon what we did at the second vertical user workshop last July when we did a mapping of common requirements, where you did a really great job, by the way, just to say that publicly. So what is the purpose of the mapping of common requirements, and where do we stand today, and where might we go in the future? That would be my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So indeed, that exercise that we had at that workshop was very good, because it set the correct mindset that basically you will, as a vertical trying to venture into the 5G space, you will need to look for peers, find your peers who have close enough functional requirements as you, and then try to harmonize them as much as possible. Like one classic example I always bring up is the automotive segment and the public safety segment, and both of them needing the direct side link type of communication. And then basically the two segments finding each other and amplifying each other and coming to 3GPP meetings and really helping the side link functionality move along was basically instrumental in making that happen. So activities like that where you find your peers and then you try to, each of you maybe give in a little bit here and there so you come to a common set of functionalities is really instrumental to making things happen in standard. So the way I always try to formulate this is having something that's 90% optimal but has a much wider potential use across verticals is much more important than having something 100% accurately catered for your needs.
That's the essence of making some compromise in order to have economies of scale across different verticals. Thank you, Balazs. For the sake of time, we need to continue. Otherwise, we are never going to finish by the 90-minute time that is given to us. So, thanks again. I'll launch a little poll just to get things. Get your attention back, and that's poll is related to the verticals and how do you consider that the verticals are well represented in the work that is being done in 3GPP, in the different working groups, etc. And so there was a little bit of a joke at the last question, and some people have answered that one. Where are the verticals? Otherwise, I see that 22% of people have voted. Hopefully, we'll get to 50%. We are at the moment 210 persons in the call, so hopefully we'll get some good statistics. Okay, and so we get 50% of the votes, and then I'll share the results. And yes, verticals are represented, but 3GPP would benefit from more vertical inputs. That's the answer. 57% of the respondents. Balazs, you want to say a little bit of some words about that one?
Yeah, this is Georg. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm very happy with this result because it shows that my view that I gave in my presentation is sort of realistic one. Obviously, if you see that your opinions and your requirements are not represented by 3GPP, you are very much invited to join us or to get into touch with us. So that's also why we have such conferences like this here, so that you get aware of whom to contact. And one good way to get in touch with 3GPP is always to visit one of the meetings, either in SA1 or one of the plenaries, to get a first idea. But obviously, you have to make the first step in one or the other way, so that we get to know each other and that we can work out what are your specific requirements and how we can cover them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I'll directly hand over to our next speaker. It will be then the messages.
Yeah, we can see your slides. Thanks very much.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So we picked two verticals, and not the obvious ones, but the second ranked in the previous survey was the industries, and especially related to the industry 4.0. And so I'm very happy to have Michael Bahr as the 5G Asia Working Group 1 chair, who's also with a hat from Siemens AG. Michael, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maxime. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Bahr. I'm with Siemens Corporate Technology in Munich. I'm a senior key expert for wireless communication and networking. As Maxime already mentioned in his introduction, I'm the working group chair of Working Group 1, Use Cases and Requirements in 5G ASEA, and the rapporteur of 2 work items in 5G ASEA that are related to 3GPP activities. Furthermore, I'm rapporteur or actively participating in the 3GPP SA1 group on requirements and services and use cases, and there I'm the rapporteur of the current work items in the CAF area of the communication for automation in vertical domains. So that's the cyber CAF work item and the FSE CAF or eCAF work item, which lead to the technical specification 2104 and the technical report 22832. Since not everyone might know the 5G ASEA, this is a very general introduction slide on the 5G ASEA. So the mission of the 5G ASEA is to promote 5G technology and its use in the manufacturing and process industry, and to support this development. The technical work happens in 5 working groups, and working group 1 on use cases and requirements, and the working group 3 on architecture and technology. They have the most connections to 3GPP and 3GPP specifications and developments. So 5G ASEA has been approved as the 3GPP market representation partner very early on in its lifetime in November 2018 already. Here you see a screenshot or a copy from the news from the 3GPP page or website. So what are the contributions of 5G ASEA to 3GPP? There are actually 2 main areas. One is the contribution of use cases or industrial use cases and requirements to 3GPP. So I will show some more details on the next slide. There is a link here for news on the for 3GPP news on the completion of the release 16 CyberCAF work, which was the very first major milestone and set out a good foundation for the work on several vertical topics for industrial automation and related industries. There's also a panel discussion at the last face-to-face plenary meeting session in Sitkes in December 2019. There, the title is Changing 3GPP to Help the Verticals. And a colleague from the European Broadcasting Unit, my colleague Joachim Walewski from Siemens, they were 2 of the panelists together with the CT chair and Georg Mayer as the SA chair. This might be also very interesting if you want to learn some experiences, how verticals experience their work in 3GPP. There's another set of contributions from 5G ASEA to 3GPP, more on the technical area. There have been contributions to channel models for the industrial environments, and there are currently contributions prepared for simulation models which focus on the use cases. So to 3, I want here a little bit the relevant 3GPP documents. As already mentioned, it's the requirements documents in SA1 22104 for the specific requirements, especially for industrial IoT, URLLC in this area. And the more general requirements go into the general 5G requirements specification TS 22261, for instance, the security requirements or the requirements on non-public networks. And you see here a little bit of names for the standards and so on. And this effort started mainly in release 16. There was a little bit done already in release 15, but the main effort was in release 16 and release 17, which is more or less finished, well, really finished with just a few little bits and pieces to be finished at the May meeting of SA1. These are enhancements to better promote or better support the 5G in industrial environments. Maybe some information about how actually contributions by 5G ASEA to 3GPP work. So as I mentioned before, 5G ASEA is an MRP in 3GPP, but 5G ASEA is not an individual member as it's called in 3GPP. So all the contributions will be discussed in the broad scope of IT companies and OT companies within 5G ASEA, but the actual contributions to 3GPP are the contributions by the separate or by the various 5G ASEA members that are also 3GPP members. There are actually quite a few OT companies or industrial companies that are also individual 3GPP members, for instance, Siemens in my case. Looking ahead towards release 18, which is getting more and more speed in release or in SA1 in stage 1 for the requirements collection. What features would I like to see in release 18 that are currently missing? So what happened in release 17 is that there's a quite good set of requirements for release 17, but not all of them are considered in the prioritization process. So I'm looking forward to getting all these requirements covered from release 17 and release 18. So that's, for instance, a fully decentralized TSN configuration model, or a more general concept for process side link that is usable in different domains. And of course, as the industry, we are looking forward to 5G hardware for testing and actually to see what it is doing. You cannot build a factory with a specification, you need some hardware for this. So this is coming, or this date is getting closer and closer, so we are looking forward to this. For the brand new requirements to release 18, yeah, there are also not really new major sets of new requirements for the industrial automation area or for manufacturing. We have a very rather complete or comprehensive set of requirements with release 17. There will be minor enhancements to your experience with the first deployments to the developments in the stage 2 and stage 3. And the important thing is to forward the release 17 requirements to release 18. Questions for the TGS chairman. So I just put them together because I don't think they are specific to SA or to RAN at all. I think there are questions in order to work on them. I don't expect for many of them not a 100% perfect.
That was super. Thank you very much, Michael. Could you, we'll see how many questions we have time to answer. If not, we will put them on I will add them to the Q&A document that we'll share with the panelists after this webinar. Just quickly, how would you summarize your experiences as a vertical industry in 3GPP? What kind of message would you give to other verticals or people from the manufacturing industry? And how important has what important role has the association played in facilitating your work?
Okay, we seem to have lost Michael at this stage. So thank you very much, Michael. That was a very good introduction of the interest of verticals towards the 3GPP work. And the same as 5GA, we really think that this is an extremely important activity that 3GPP is doing to serve the different verticals. Now, what we, as from our side, have to do as a representative of a vertical, we are bringing needs, requirements, and even proposals to 3GPP, and we are very happy to see that many of these considerations are taken into account in the different working groups. Now, the second vertical that we wanted to hear from is represented by Antonio Arcidiacono. He's chairman of the 5G MAG, and he's representing EBU as the Director of Technology and Innovation, EBU being the European Broadcasting Union. Thanks, Antonio, and you have the floor.
Thank you. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us here. I hope that you are hearing me well and that you see the slides. I will be speaking today about the activities of one of the verticals, which is the media industry related to 3GPP and 5G. And for this reason, and because we have recognized that the media industry was not represented in a, say, convergent way and a strong way with respect to 3GPP, we created not so long ago, this was in October 2019, what is called the 5G Media Action Group. So this is an organization, a not-for-profit organization that has been created a few months ago. And the main goals of this organization is to represent the interests of the audiovisual industry, in particular in two specific areas. The one of broadcasting and distribution in general of content, and the other one is the one of the production and contribution of content and how this can be used in combination with the 5G technologies. So we are, this is a global organization, and this is an organization where we have representation from all areas of the industry, of the media of companies, the broadcasters, the media service providers, but also the infrastructure providers, the telcos, and all other areas, the regulatory areas, etc. So the basic idea is to see how to profit from the enormous say, set of tools that the 5G and the 3GPP is proposing to the media market, and to find a solution which is serving the needs of this of the media industry community. So on one side, what we are considering is to combine different technology solutions for serving this. And this is something that has always been the case when you want to provide in an intelligent way quality of service, reach, and at the same time sustainability for your services. So I will speak in a moment about what we have in mind. The basic idea is to combine different supports in delivering the content. You've been speaking about, of course, cellular infrastructures, but also I will speak about terrestrial towers, I will speak about satellites, and this in a combination of broadcast, multicast, and unicast in an intelligent way. And at the same time, on the content production and contribution side, what we need is guaranteed bandwidth with fast, low latency and reliable wireless connections. This is another area very important today. There are a lot of applications there, and this is another area where we are interested. So in the end is the end-to-end ability to produce, contribute, and distribute content to the whole population in the world in a cost-effective and sustainable way. Now, starting from the media distribution, so this has to do with linear services, non-linear services, enhanced media services and platforms. The basic idea is that while in the past we have been looking at content either delivered live in a linear way, like in the terrestrial broadcast channels that you've been all using and you are still using today, the non-linear services on the other side, so the on-demand online IP services, and all other solutions which are the one that could work with multicast and with local storage, etc., that could serve the purpose of delivering contents in a much more efficient way. The basic idea there is when you have a live football game or any sport event or news, but also when you have content like an episode of a series that is consumed by millions of people, it is more intelligent to distribute this one to many in a, say, broadcast, multicast way more than waiting for people to load the content one by one. So by combining the personalization possible for the one-to-one and the advantage in distribution of the one-to-many coming from the broadcast and multicast infrastructures, then you can actually obtain sustainability and guaranteed quality of service. So looking at the requirements in distribution coming from the media providers, the media service providers, you see here I'm summarizing the core of those requirements. I will not go into each and every detail. You will have these slides available after the webinar, but it is clear that there are requirements that are specific to the public service media, there are requirements that are specific to the commercial media providers, but there are also requirements that go all across. So starting from the universal coverage and access, we are speaking about mobility. So here, the need to reach 100% of the population and 100% of the territory, because when you are in mobility, you want to reach 100% of the territory, is a mandatory requirement. We need to be able to deliver content on a free-to-air basis to 100% of the population. This is a typical mandate of the public service for all the basic information services, for example. We have to guarantee the quality of service. It is not possible to trade quality of service against reach. And we need to be scalable. We need to be able to deliver content to millions of users at the same time. So all this has to do with the cost, has to do with the sustainability, and all this has to be easy to be used and accessible to everybody. And this is also very important, as it has been mentioned several times, when you speak about public warning, ability to reach the whole population instantly, and using an infrastructure that is used every day and not an infrastructure that will surprise you and will not work in the specific moment. A few minutes ago, one of the colleagues was speaking also about other applications which are not necessarily in the entertainment, information, or education side, but they are more, for example, for the localization of your car or your vehicle. He was speaking about centimeter precision and information to be delivered to millions of people, to thousands of people at the same time, depending on the situation. It is obvious that when I send corrections for my localization, if I use a broadcast, multicast kind of infrastructure, this is much more effective in cost terms than trying to do thousands and thousands one-to-one connections. And if you have a traffic jam that is blocked by one or two vehicles that have not been receiving the correct information, then this could be a problem. So all this to say that is only by combining the infrastructures, by combining the different tools that exist in 3GPP already today, and as I will show in a moment, it is possible to optimize the quality of service, the new service that you are providing at a cost that is sustainable. And then there are the requirements of the commercial providers. Of course, there is the part on monetization, the encryption, the copy protection, the target advertising, and the enhanced media services, where this could be in real-time gaming, time-shifted video, video on demand in general. So all this is a set of requirements which is so broad and so large that cannot be served by a single solution. But fortunately, the 5G and the 3GPP specifications are foreseeing this. So to be practical, what we are looking for are solutions that are combining those technologies together. So the broadcast, the unicast, the multicast push, and the local storage technology, so that the technology that we are using is serving the purpose of guaranteed quality of service at the lower possible cost. And using different physical infrastructure. So of course, cellular infrastructure, but also towers, the high towers that we use today for broadcasting, and the satellite overlay to cover the old territories and areas where it doesn't make sense from the economical point of view to serve using terrestrial infrastructure because it's too expensive. So this is our approach to the delivery of this. So in this respect, as I said, 3GPP has been working a lot, we have in release 16 a full LTE-based 5G terrestrial broadcast set of specifications. This is using, as I'm saying, the LTE-based waveform, while on the release 17 we have more a specification which is 5G new radio based, on which also the multicast and broadcast are implemented, but without all the functionalities that you have, for example, on the LTE-based 5G, and vice versa. So we are almost there. That is work on a common core that will serve these two runs. We are in a daily collaboration with 3GPP, but one of the typical asks for 3GPP is to help us deliver these services to the market using the chipset that are going to be embedded in all terminals, and at the same time giving the flexibility to accommodate all the media services. In the end, the media services will be one of the fundamental and most demanding part in terms of service provision on a 5G infrastructure to the end users. I mean, we know that in terms of consumption, there is something like 80%, sometimes 90, 95% of the total bandwidth is used for multimedia content. So this is an area where it is important to find the right solution and to arrive to a good, flexible and interoperable solution. On the content contribution and production, we are actively also working there. We are working with our broadcasters that are eager to have solutions to produce and contribute content. There are elements that needs to be solved. There are technologies that exist on paper that have not yet been implemented, and it is important to bring those to fruition. So we are working on the technical requirements and we are working on the implementation of those, on the specification that are being embedded in the release 17. And there again, we are very eager to work to be able to have solutions for contribution that could be running on cameras, can be running on drones, can be running on any new production infrastructure to serve the purpose of storytelling with new possibilities. And I mean, the lessons learned from the crisis of the COVID crisis in these days, being able to remote produce in a very easy and guaranteed quality of service way is also an important one. So the 5G MAG activities are so in identifying the use cases, estimating the market size so that the people developing the chips and the terminals are say pushed and comforted in developing those chipsets and terminals, catalyze the development of collaborative infrastructures, putting together different layers, different protocols, collaborate with the mobile and the automotive industries, because this is not a single monolithic media industry. This is a all integrated set of industries working together, and facilitate and support pilot networks, terminal prototypes, and all the steps that are necessary to arrive to deploy this in the market. So today we have 40 members in the 5G MAG, and you are all invited to join into this group that is dealing with media. And we have another 10 members pending. There are advantages for several industries, and I will only concentrate on 4 specific cases here from this approach coming from the media industry. Of course, for the media industry, for hybrid services combining linear and time shifted, as I've been explaining, broadcast, multicast, local storage, and representing a cost-effective and sustainable solution. This is a win for the media industry. This is a win for the overall entertainment, information, education industry. But this is also a win for the mobile mobile network providers, for the mobile service providers, because by reducing the load of the networks when there are peaks in traffic for live events or for all content that can be put in multicast push, what you are doing is you are reducing your cost of infrastructure for the unicast part, and you will not be obliged to dimension this to the peak of the demand, but this will be adapted to the usage in the unicast part. And by combining the multicast broadcast with the unicast, there is a possibility of guaranteeing the quality of service while at the same time providing from the personalization to the distribution of events to large number of users. And of course, then the additional advantage, which is the one of the coverage over very large areas and covering 100% of the population. And as I said, 100% of the territory, which is very often non-sustainable using a pure cellular unicast infrastructure. The advantage for the automotive industry, this is another area, and this has to do, as I said, with the 100% of the territory, 100% of the population, and the guaranteed quality of service. I made the examples of the localization, but it is just one. I mean, software download, map upgrades, alerts, and all sorts of other applications. So this combination of broadcast, multicast, and unicast, this is very important for also the automotive industry, we believe, and we are open, of course, to open dialogue and discuss with them as much as possible. And last but not least, of course, the usage of a broadcast multicast infrastructure is typically the one that will serve perfectly the purpose of public warning services. This is the ideal solution because it will be used every day at full scale to be able to reach 100% of the population and the territory. And this will guarantee that when in need to deliver information to large population, this will work because it has been always used at the maximum of the resource. So this is another natural part where combining the normal cellular infrastructure with the broadcast multicast infrastructure will serve the purpose of reaching 100% of the population. So that's the idea. That's where we are active at the moment, and I'm of course available for any question you may have. Thank you,
Antonio. That was very useful, and it shows the importance of bringing traditional industries such as broadcasting into the whole picture of 5G, and we see that this is a very nice new initiative from this group to represent the media, the broadcasting industry in the 5G activities. I thank you for that. Now we do need to wrap up. I'll hand over directly to Stephanie, and I'll let her conclude. Thanks.
And thanks, everybody. We haven't had time to answer all of your questions today, but we will get back to you. You will receive an email tomorrow from us, and we will keep you posted also in terms of the availability of the post-event report. And also on the Q&As that we haven't had time to answer, we will get back to you on that. Please note that we have an online standards tracker, which is supported by the 5G Industry Infrastructure Association, I beg your pardon, through our working group. So you can get in touch with me. If you look at my slides, you can see my email. Rather than writing to the webinar address, please write to me directly, and we will share them as appropriate with the group of people who have been organising this series of webinars, picking up on the workshops that we did in 2019. So, you can find lots of things on this tracker, including the common requirements. So this is sort of the place to go. We like to see it as a collaboration platform between the telecommunications industry and the industry verticals. We will be back in touch with you very soon with all of the information. We will be hosting 2 more webinars before mid-July. The next one will be on May the 26th at 11 o'clock CEST. where we'll be looking at regulatory and legal requirement issues. So that will also include things like spectrum sharing and unlicensed spectrum and so on, and other issues as well that are directly related to the rollout of 5G for industry verticals. And then we will do the third webinar will be after the next 3GPP plenary. Probably we need to find a date that fits our TSG chairs, but that will go back to the industry verticals, and we hope to bring on board some newcomers to the 5G standardization landscape. So thanks again. I don't know if you want to say a final word. I think the panelists did a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Maxime, for your help in moderating. You've been superb. So I don't know if you want to say a few final words, Maxime.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for organizing all this, and yeah, have a good time at home and stay healthy.
Yeah, stay safe, everybody. Yes, thank you for joining, and thank you to my network provider. We held up a very large number of participants, so thanks again.